My daughter's life was nearly destroyed because I stole money from an entitled rich boy, but after surviving CPS, eviction, and threats, I took his family with evidence he didn't know I had. As a single mom working close to 70 hours a week, my schedule is fuller than a sorority girl on spring break, meaning the simple task of grocery shopping is basically mission impossible. I drive to the local supermarket with my 4-year-old daughter Charlotte in the back, and everything is accounted for. Traffic time, bathroom emergency detour, supermarket small talk, but there was always one thing I never saw coming: parking lot wait time. I was waiting almost 15 minutes for a parking spot, and if you're a mother, you'll understand just how much this can make your head spin. I was practically crying tears of joy when I saw a car start to back up, but then a Tesla pulled up. I looked at the man driving it: Rolex watch, Gucci sunglasses, expensive suit. He couldn't have been older than 20 either, so I knew it was his parents' money. And as I started to pull into the empty spot, he recklessly sped in front of me and stole it, almost grazing my car. Anger boiled my blood. By this point, my 4-year-old was crying, and I only had 20 minutes left to do the weekly shopping if I wanted to be on time for work. I rolled down the window to let him hear my baby girl, hoping for an ounce of guilt or empathy, but instead, he got out of the car, walked up to my window, and gave me the finger before walking into the store. Most would have been furious, but me, I was calm, happy even, like a 6th grader being let out of school for summer, because I was about to rob this guy blind. Legally, of course. You see, the whole reason I was a single mom is because my baby daddy had been arrested. He refused to get a conventional career and earned money by framing rich people. He'd go to the wealthiest areas in the state and camp out in the car park until he found his victim. He'd then purposely tick them off in some way, and when they left, he followed them until he caught sight of a security camera. He'd then drive super close to them and get them to crash into his very cheap car. And since it was to fund the life of our baby girl, I let him do it. He had become such an expert that he was able to do this almost 30 times before getting arrested for insurance fraud. And because I had a completely clean record with my insurance company, I knew my time had come to follow in his footsteps. After 10 more minutes, I found a parking spot and dropped my baby girl at the supervised kids play area in the mall. I then rushed back out to my car, called in sick to my job, and waited. Soon, Mr. Tesla came back out. I followed him. As we neared the security cameras on the highway, I did a little crafting, and within 2 minutes, Mr. Tesla had rear-ended me. Oh no, cue the dramatics. Ambulance, mild concussion, medical reports, witness statements. 6 months later, I had $40,000 in my account. I used it to move us into a better apartment, pay off my debts, and most importantly, buy Charlotte the pink princess bed she had wanted for over a year. And for a few weeks, it felt like I had won, until it didn't. Because it turns out Mr. Tesla wasn't just some spoiled brat in designer gear. He was the son of a high-powered criminal defense attorney. And suddenly I realized I'd scammed the son of a man who never lets things slide. First, my boss at the call center became strangely cold toward me. Lisa had always been friendly before, even understanding about my single mom schedule challenges. Suddenly, she was scrutinizing my timesheets and questioning my bathroom breaks. When I asked her directly what had changed, she mentioned that upper management was pressuring all supervisors to crack down on time theft, and that her hands were tied. I found out why a week later. Someone had requested my entire employment file, performance reviews, attendance records, everything. When I asked HR about it, they just said it was standard procedure. Standard for what, they wouldn't say. Then my car got towed from my apartment complex parking lot. I'd parked in the same spot for over a year without issues. Suddenly my car was gone, and the apartment manager claimed they'd sent multiple notices about unauthorized parking. I never received a single warning. Getting my car back cost $300 I didn't have, forcing me to take an advance on my paycheck. When I went to the impound lot, they had no record of why my car was towed in the first place, just that someone had called it in. I started feeling paranoid. Was I imagining things? Was this all just a string of bad luck? Then one evening after my shift, I found a business card tucked under my windshield wiper. The name printed on it: Richard Maxwell, attorney at law. Below that, a handwritten note: I know what you did. My stomach dropped. I looked around the parking lot, half expecting to see someone watching me, but there was no one. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that Tesla driver. Who was he? I didn't even know his name. I tried searching online for Richard Maxwell attorney and felt sick when the results loaded. Maxwell and Sons, one of the biggest criminal defense firms in the state. Their website featured a team photo, and there he was, the Tesla driver, standing next to Richard Maxwell Sr., founding partner. The caption identified him as Richard Maxwell Jr., newly graduated from law school and joining the family firm. I'd scammed the son of possibly the most connected attorney in the city. The next morning, I got a call from daycare saying someone had tried to pick up Charlotte claiming to be her aunt. When the staff asked for ID and called me to verify, the woman left quickly. The description matched no one I knew. That same afternoon, there was a knock at my door. A woman in a pantsuit introduced herself as a caseworker from Child Protective Services. Someone had made an anonymous report about Charlotte being left alone for extended periods while I worked. The caseworker did a walkthrough of our apartment, asking invasive questions about my work schedule, Charlotte's father, our daily routines. She seemed particularly interested in how I'd afforded our recent move to a nicer place. I kept it together until she left, then broke down in tears. This wasn't random bad luck. Someone was methodically picking apart my life. My phone rang later that evening. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. You picked the wrong person to mess with, said a voice I recognized as Richard Maxwell Jr. I said nothing, just listened to my heart pounding in my ears. That $40,000? Consider it a loan with very high interest. I'm going to take everything from you, piece by piece. He hung up before I could respond. I sat on my couch, paralyzed paralyzed with fear. What had I done? I'd thought I was being clever, getting back at some entitled rich kid. Instead, I'd painted a target on my back and my daughter's. The next day, I received an eviction notice. My landlord claimed I'd violated my lease by running a business from my apartment, something expressly forbidden in the rental agreement. The evidence? Anonymous complaints about excessive visitors and suspicious activities. I knew fighting it would be pointless. The Maxwells clearly had connections everywhere. That night, I called the only person who might understand what I was facing. Charlotte's father, Jake. He was still in prison, but due for release in 3 months. The collect call connected, and I spilled everything through tears. The parking spot, the insurance scam, the Maxwells, everything. You need to document everything, Jake said, his voice sounding tinny through the prison phone. Every weird call, every strange incident, and you need to reach out to my old buddy Michael. Michael had done time with Jake years ago. He now ran a legitimate security company, but he also knew how to operate in gray areas when necessary. Tell him I said to put the word out. The Maxwells play dirty, but they're not the only ones with connections. I didn't like the sound of that, but I was desperate. Maxwell was systematically destroying my life, and I had no idea how to fight back. The next day, I called Michael. He listened without interrupting, then simply said, "I'll be there in an hour." Michael wasn't what I expected. Clean-cut, professional-looking, with kind eyes that hardened when I showed him the eviction notice and explained about the CPS visit. "Jake saved my life inside," he said simply. "I owe him, which means I'm going to help you." For the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny spark of hope. "First thing we need to do is get you and Charlotte somewhere safe," Michael said. "Somewhere the Maxwells can't find you." "I can't just disappear," I protested. "I have a job. Charlotte has daycare. You won't have either of those things soon if Maxwell keeps coming after you," Michael pointed out. "We need to buy time until Jake gets out." That night, Charlotte and I packed essential belongings into my Honda. Michael arranged for us to stay in a rental cabin owned by another of Jake's friends, about an hour outside the city. As I drove away from our apartment in the darkness, Charlotte asleep in her car seat, I wondered how my life had spiraled so completely out of control, all because of a parking spot and a moment of vengeful opportunity. I didn't know if I could fix this mess, but I knew one thing for certain. I'd do whatever it took to protect my daughter from the storm I'd created. The cabin was small but cozy, tucked away in a wooded area where cell service was spotty but decent enough to stay connected. Michael had arranged for groceries to be delivered before we arrived, so the fridge was stocked with everything we might need. Charlotte was excited about our adventure vacation and spent the first morning exploring every inch of the place while I tried to figure out our next steps. "Mommy, look at the squirrels," she squealed, pointing out the window. I smiled despite everything. 4-year-olds have this amazing ability to find joy in the smallest things, even when their whole world is falling apart around them. Michael called around noon to check on us. He told me he'd assigned someone named Casey to keep an eye on the area, just in case. I wasn't sure if that made me feel safer or more terrified. "Any news on my job situation?" I took a deep breath before asking, but Michael's pause told me everything before he even spoke. My call center had let me go for excessive unexcused absences. Apparently, someone had hacked into the system and changed my approved time-off requests to unauthorized absences. Even Lisa couldn't override it when the system showed I'd missed shifts I knew I'd worked. I sat down hard on the cabin's threadbare couch. How am I supposed to support Charlotte now? "Jake and I have a fund," Michael said, "for emergencies. This qualifies." I started to protest, but he cut me off. "It's clean money, I promise." Jake put aside some of his legitimate earnings before things went sideways. I accepted reluctantly. Pride was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. The following day, Michael arrived with a laptop and a stack of papers. He'd been digging into the Maxwells, looking for leverage. "Richard Maxwell Sr. is untouchable," he explained, spreading documents across the small dining table. "Old money, political connections, the works. Junior, though, he's got some skeletons." Michael showed me photos of Junior partying at exclusive clubs, doing things his father's conservative clients wouldn't appreciate. Nothing illegal, but definitely reputation damaging. "This isn't enough," I said, pushing the photos away. "He'll just say they're photoshopped." Michael nodded. "You're right, but it's a start. We need more." 3 days into our cabin stay, my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello, Jessica. Hiding won't help you." Junior's voice was calm, almost friendly. "That cabin isn't as secret as you think." My blood turned to ice. I hung up and immediately called Michael. "We need to move," I told him, already stuffing Charlotte's clothes into a bag. "He knows where we are." Michael arrived in 30 minutes, his face grim. "I've got another place. My sister's vacation house in the mountains. She's out of the country." We packed everything in record time. Charlotte sensed my urgency and didn't ask questions, just clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit as we hustled to Michael's SUV. As we pulled away, I noticed a black car turning onto the long driveway leading to the cabin. Michael saw it too and accelerated down the back road. "Was that them?" I whispered, not wanting Charlotte to hear. Michael's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Probably. We've got a leak somewhere." The mountain house was larger and more isolated. No neighbors for miles. Michael installed security cameras and taught me how to use the monitoring system on a tablet. "I've got friends looking into Junior," he said before leaving, "and I've arranged for some cash to tide you over." I hated depending on Michael's charity, but I had no choice. My savings were dwindling, and I couldn't risk applying for unemployment benefits that might reveal our location. A week passed in tense isolation. Charlotte was getting bored and asking questions I couldn't answer. When would we go home? Why couldn't she talk to her friends at daycare? I made up stories about a special vacation, but she was smart enough to know something was wrong. Michael checked in daily. He'd found out that Junior had been using the family firm's resources to track me down. He'd pulled my credit history, phone records, even my internet search history. The guy was obsessed. "It's not just about the money anymore," Michael said during one call. "This is personal for him." "But why?" I asked, watching Charlotte color at the kitchen table. "It was just an insurance claim. His daddy's firm probably handles dozens of those every month. Rich people hate being outsmarted," Michael said simply, "especially by someone they see as beneath them." The next day, Michael arrived with actual good news. Jake's release date had been moved up due to prison overcrowding. He'd be out in 3 weeks instead of 3 months. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of real hope. Jake might have been a criminal, but but he knew how to handle people like the Maxwells. He'd know what to do, but Junior wasn't done with me yet. That evening, I received an email containing a video. It showed me following Junior's Tesla out of the mall parking lot that fateful day, clearly intentionally positioning myself for the accident. The footage came from a security camera I hadn't noticed. The message was simple. I have enough to put you away for fraud. Turn yourself in, or I'll send this to the police, your insurance company, and CPS. I called Michael in a panic. He arrived the next morning looking more worried than I'd seen him yet. He's bluffing, Michael said after reviewing the video. If he goes to the cops, he admits his family paid out a fraudulent claim. His father would kill him. So why hasn't he used this yet? I asked. Michael's expression was grim. He wants to break you, make you come begging, and probably inflict as much emotional damage as possible before dropping the hammer. 1 week before Jake's release, Charlotte developed a high fever. The nearest hospital was 30 miles away, and I was terrified of going anywhere public where we might be spotted. But when her temperature hit 103, I had no choice. I called Michael, who sent his sister Dakota to escort us. She was a no-nonsense woman with a permit to carry a concealed weapon, which she made sure I knew about. Anyone gives you trouble, they deal with me, she said, helping me carry a drowsy Charlotte to my car. The emergency room was mercifully quiet. The doctor diagnosed an ear infection, prescribed antibiotics, and sent us on our way within 2 hours. As we walked toward the exit, I spotted a familiar black Tesla in the parking lot. Don't look, Dakota whispered, guiding me toward a side door instead. Keep walking. We made it to my car without incident, but as we pulled out of the parking lot, the Tesla fell in behind us. He's following us, I said, my voice shaking. Dakota pulled out her phone. I've got this. She made a quick call, speaking in what sounded like code. 5 minutes later, a police cruiser appeared behind the Tesla, lights flashing. The Tesla pulled over, and we continued on. Friend in the sheriff's department, Dakota explained with a slight smile. They'll keep him busy for a while, but the close call rattled me. Junior was watching hospitals now. How far would this guy go? The next week was a blur of anxiety. Charlotte recovered from her infection, but I barely slept, jumping at every sound outside. Michael increased security around the mountain house, installing motion sensors and bright lights. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Michael called with devastating news. Someone had planted drugs in Jake's cell during a routine search. His early release was canceled, and he was facing new charges that could add years to his sentence. This is Maxwell's work, Michael said, his voice tight with anger. He's making sure Jake can't help you. I broke down completely that night after Charlotte was asleep. I'd dragged my innocent daughter into this mess. I'd lost my job, my home, and now Jake's release. Our best hope was gone. The walls were closing in. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't run forever. Charlotte deserved stability, not this life on the run. I called Junior's office number directly. His secretary tried to screen me, but I mentioned the insurance claim, and suddenly Junior was on the line. Ready to surrender? He asked, sounding amused. I want to talk, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, face to face. He agreed to meet at a public park the following day. Michael was furious when I told him. You can't trust him, he insisted. This is exactly what he wants. I can't live like this anymore, I said. Charlotte needs normalcy. I need to end this. Michael couldn't talk me out of it, but he insisted on setting up surveillance at the park. He and 2 of his security team would be watching from concealed positions. So on the following day, I left Charlotte with Dakota and drove to the meeting spot. Junior was already there, sitting on a bench, looking annoyingly relaxed in designer casual wear. I sat down beside him, maintaining as much distance as the bench allowed. You've led me on quite a chase, he said, smiling like we were old friends catching up. What do you want from me? I asked directly. The money's gone. I spent it on bills and moving expenses, he chuckled. This was never about the money. Do you know what my father said when he found out about our little accident? He said I was careless, that I should have been more aware of my surroundings. Junior's face hardened. I'm never careless. You set me up, and I'm going to make an example of you. By ruining a single mother's life, I shot back. Real tough guy. By showing what happens to people who try to take advantage of me, he corrected. But I'm willing to be merciful. He slid a document across the bench. It was a confession, admitting to insurance fraud and attempting to extort money from Richard Maxwell Jr. Sign this, and it all goes away, he said. I'll even throw in a little going away money. Enough for you and your kid to start fresh somewhere else. I stared at the paper. And if I don't? Junior's smile disappeared. Then I finish what I started. That CPS case is still open. 1 call and they'll be looking at you for child endangerment. Hiding your kid in remote cabins? Looks pretty suspicious. My hands trembled as I considered my options. Signing meant admitting to a crime I could be prosecuted for later. Not signing meant continuing this nightmare. I need time to think, I said finally. You have 24 hours, Junior replied, standing up. Oh, and tell your friends in the SUV across the street that they're not as subtle as they think. He walked away, leaving the confession on the bench. I grabbed it and hurried back to my car, fighting tears. Michael was waiting when I returned to the mountain house. I showed him the confession. It's a trap, he said immediately. Once you sign this, he owns you. What choice do I have? I asked, watching Charlotte play with her toys, blissfully unaware of our situation. Michael was quiet for a long moment. There might be another way. He made some calls that night, speaking in hushed tones away from me. The next morning, he laid out a plan so crazy I thought he'd lost his mind. We're going to flip the script, he explained, use his own tactics against him. Michael had discovered that Junior had been skimming from the law firm's client trust accounts, small amounts that added up over time. Not enough for the firm's annual audit to catch, but definitely illegal. How did you find this out? I asked, shocked. The firm's bookkeeper owes Jake a favor, Michael said. The point is, Junior's been embezzling. We have proof, and we're going to use it. The plan was risky. I would meet Junior as scheduled, but instead of signing his confession, I'd present him with evidence of his embezzlement. He'll deny it, I pointed out. Doesn't matter, Michael said. His father won't take that chance. Senior's reputation is everything to him. I spent the rest of the day rehearsing what I'd say. Michael coached me through various scenarios, including what to do if Junior became aggressive. Remember, we'll be watching, he assured me. Nothing will happen to you. The meeting place was a coffee shop this time. More public, more witnesses. I arrived early, chose a table with a clear view of the door, and waited. Junior arrived exactly on time, looking confident and slightly bored. He sat down across from me, not bothering with pleasantries. So, decision time. I pushed a folder toward him instead of the signed confession he expected. You might want to look at this first. His expression changed from confusion to shock to fury as he flipped through the pages of financial records Michael had provided. Where did you get these? He demanded, his voice low but intense. Does it matter? I replied, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. The question is, what would your father say if he saw them? Junior's face flushed with anger. You're blackmailing me now? You've got some nerve. I prefer to think of it as mutual assured destruction, I said, using Michael's exact words from our preparation. You have dirt on me, I have dirt on you. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to back off. Completely. No more harassment, no more threats, no more messing with Jake's prison sentence. Junior leaned forward. And why would I agree to that? Because if anything happens to me, Charlotte, or Jake, these records go straight to your father and the State Bar Association, I said, tapping the folder. Your choice. For several long seconds, Junior just stared at me. I could almost see the calculations happening behind his eyes. Fine, he finally said. We'll call it even. But I want those records. I shook my head. Insurance policy. They stay with me. He stood up abruptly. You're making a mistake. No, I said quietly. My mistake was that day in the parking lot. I'm fixing it now. Junior left without another word, taking the empty confession with him. I sat there for several minutes afterward, hands shaking with delayed adrenaline. Michael's voice came through the tiny earpiece he'd given me. You did good. Now let's get you home. The next few days were tense. I kept expecting Junior to retaliate somehow, but nothing happened. Michael's sources reported that Junior had taken a sudden leave of absence from the family firm. A week later, I received an unexpected call from the prison. Jake had been cleared of the drug charges after security footage mysteriously surfaced, showing a guard planting the evidence. His early release was back on track. Maxwell Sr. stepped in, Michael explained when I called him with the news. He must have figured out what Junior was up to and shut it down to protect the family name, but also because he genuinely seemed disturbed by his son's behavior. From what my sources tell me, Sr. has a strong ethical code despite defending some questionable clients. Slowly, cautiously, we began rebuilding our lives. Michael helped me find a new apartment in a secure building. I applied for jobs, eventually landing a customer service position at a local utility company with regular hours and benefits. Charlotte started at a new daycare, where she quickly made friends. The shadows under her eyes disappeared as our routine stabilized. 3 weeks later, Jake was released. He came straight to our new apartment, looking thinner but healthier than when he went in. Charlotte was overjoyed to see her daddy, though she barely remembered him. That night, after Charlotte was asleep, Jake, Michael, and I sat around my small kitchen table. Junior's gone, Michael reported. Senior shipped him off to the family's London office. Word is he's on a very tight leash now. Will it last? I asked. Jake nodded. Senior's old school. Family reputation means everything. He won't let Junior jeopardize that again. So it's really over? I could hardly believe it. As over as these things get, Jake said, reaching for my hand. You did good, Jess. You protected our girl. I thought about the roller coaster of the past few months. The fear, the uncertainty, the desperate measures. All because of a parking spot and a moment of bad judgment. I need you both to promise me something, I said, looking between Jake and Michael. No more schemes, no more cons. Charlotte deserves better than that. They both nodded solemnly. Speaking of better, Jake said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. Michael tells me you're still driving that death trap Honda. Inside the envelope was a check. Jake's legitimate savings from before his arrest. Enough for a decent used car. Consider it child support back pay, he said with a half smile. The next day, I traded in my Honda for a reliable used SUV with working air conditioning and actual airbags. As Charlotte and I drove home, she asked innocently from her car seat, are the bad people gone now, Mommy? I met her eyes in the rearview mirror. Yes, baby, the bad people are gone. And for the first time in months, I actually believed it. 2 days later, I received a plain envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a cashier's check for exactly $40,000, the amount of my original insurance settlement, and a brief handwritten note, for Charlotte's college fund. Let's never meet again. R.M. Sr. I stared at the check for a long time, tempted to tear it up, but Charlotte's future mattered more than my pride. I deposited it in a new college savings account the next day. That evening, as Charlotte played with her toys in our living room, Jake stopped by with pizza and news. He'd found legitimate work as a mechanic at Michael's brother-in-law's garage. No more shortcuts, he promised, watching our daughter build a block tower. I missed too much already. I wasn't naive enough to think everything would be perfect from now on. Jake and I had too much history for that, but we had something we'd never had before, a fresh start built on honesty instead of schemes. As we sat eating pizza and watching Charlotte play, I realized something important. The Maxwells, with all their money and power, had something fundamentally broken in their family. Junior's actions and Senior's cold damage control showed that clearly. Our little family might be unconventional, divorced parents, ex-con dad, mom who made a terrible mistake, but there was love here. Real love, not obligation or reputation management. That night, after everyone had gone and Charlotte was asleep in her pink princess bed, I sat on our small balcony looking at the stars. For the first time in months, I wasn't looking over my shoulder or jumping at every noise. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Security system all set up. Sleep well. I smiled, grateful for the friends this ordeal had given us. Tomorrow, I'd start my new job. Charlotte would go to her new daycare. Jake would start at the garage. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was ours, and we'd fought hard to keep it. The next morning, I dropped Charlotte off at daycare and headed to my new job. My stomach was full of butterflies as I drove into the parking lot. New job means new people, new routines. It's like first day of school jitters, except with bills to pay. The utility company building looked like every other boring office building, all beige and fluorescent lighting. I took a deep breath and walked in. Orientation went pretty smoothly. The HR lady, Susan, was super nice and patient with all my questions. The job itself seemed straightforward enough, answering customer calls about their bills, setting up payment plans, that kind of stuff. Nothing glamorous, but the regular hours and benefits were exactly what Charlotte and I needed. During my lunch break, I texted Michael to check in. That had become our routine. Daily daily check-ins just to make sure everything was still okay. He replied that all was quiet on the Maxwell front, which was a relief. I was still half expecting the other shoe to drop any day. When I picked up Charlotte that afternoon, she was full of stories about her new friends at daycare. My heart felt lighter seeing her so happy. We stopped for ice cream on the way home to celebrate our first successful day in our new normal. Jake came over that evening with dinner. He was really making an effort to be present in Charlotte's life. While she played in her room, Jake and I had a serious talk about our future co-parenting arrangement. I'm not asking to get back together, he said, keeping his voice low, but I want to be a real dad to her. I nodded. The old Jake would have been looking for an angle, some way to work the system. This Jake seemed different. Prison had changed him, or maybe just missing so much of Charlotte's life had. We can work something out, I told him, but I meant what I said about no more schemes. A week into my new job, I was starting to feel like maybe things really would be okay. Charlotte was thriving at daycare. Jake was showing up consistently for his scheduled visits. Michael had scaled back the security but still checked in regularly. Then I got a call from an unknown number during my lunch break. My heart immediately started racing. I almost didn't answer, but what if it was Charlotte's daycare? I couldn't ignore it. Hello? I said cautiously. Jessica, this is Richard Maxwell Sr. I nearly dropped my phone. My mind raced through every worst-case scenario. Had Junior convinced his father to come after me after all? What do you want? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I want to meet, just once, to ensure we have an understanding. Every instinct told me to refuse, but curiosity won out. When and where? He suggested a restaurant downtown the following evening. Neutral ground, public place. I agreed, but immediately called Michael afterward. Don't go alone, he warned. I don't care how public the place is. So the next evening, Michael drove me to the restaurant while Jake stayed with Charlotte. Michael took a table nearby where he could keep an eye on things while I met with Maxwell. Senior Richard. Maxwell Sr. was nothing like his son. Where Junior was flashy and arrogant, Senior was understated and composed. His suit probably cost more than my car, but it wasn't showy. He stood politely when I approached the table. Thank you for coming, he said, gesturing for me to sit. I slid into the chair, keeping my back straight, trying to project more confidence than I felt. I'll be direct, he said after we'd ordered drinks. My son's actions were inexcusable. Both the initial incident in the parking lot and his subsequent, he paused, searching for the right word, vendetta. I stayed quiet, waiting for whatever was coming next. You should know that Junior is no longer in a position to cause problems for you or your family. I've taken steps to ensure that. Why? I asked. Why step in now? Maxwell Sr. sighed, looking down momentarily. When he looked back up, I saw something unexpected in his eyes. Remorse. Because I failed as a father in many ways. I was too focused on building the family legacy, and not enough on building character in my son. And because your friend Michael made some persuasive arguments that this situation had gotten out of hand, I glanced over at Michael, who was pretending to read a menu while obviously listening to every word. So that's it? It's just over? I couldn't believe it would be that simple. It's over, Maxwell Sr. confirmed. The check I sent you, consider it compensation for my son's behavior, not payment for silence. Though I would appreciate discretion about certain aspects of this situation. He meant the embezzlement. I nodded slowly. One more thing, he said, sliding a business card across the table. Should you ever need legal assistance, my firm is at your disposal. Pro bono, of course. I took the card, not sure what to say. Thank you, I guess. As we finished our drinks, Maxwell Sr. asked an unexpected question. Your daughter, Charlotte, is it? How is she doing with all this? The question seemed genuinely concerned, not calculated. She's resilient, I answered. Kids are good at bouncing back when they feel safe. He nodded thoughtfully. Good. Children shouldn't pay for their parents' mistakes. When we left, Michael immediately wanted all the details. I filled him in as we drove home. Do you trust him? Michael asked. I don't know, I admitted. But I think he's more concerned about protecting the family name than anything else. And right now, that means leaving us alone. The next few weeks passed without incident. I started to relax into our routine. My new job was going well. I even got a compliment from my supervisor on how quickly I was learning the systems. Charlotte was thriving in daycare and loving having her dad around more. Jake was sticking to his promise of no more schemes, working honest hours at the garage. Then one evening as I was leaving work, I spotted a familiar black Tesla in the parking lot. My blood ran cold. I fumbled for my phone to call Michael, but before I could dial, the driver's side door opened. It wasn't Junior. It was his father. Ms. Williams, Maxwell Sr. called. A moment of your time? I approached cautiously, keeping a good distance between us. What is it? I wanted to let you know personally that Junior has accepted a permanent position with our London office. He won't be returning to the States for the foreseeable future. I blinked in surprise. Okay, thank you for telling me. Maxwell Sr. nodded. Also, I took the liberty of reviewing your previous employment record. The irregularities have been corrected. Should you wish to return to your position at the call center, the door is open. I was speechless. The call center job had better pay than the utility company. Why would you do that? I asked finally. Maxwell Sr. looked tired suddenly, older than his years. I've spent most of my life defending people who've made mistakes. Some deserved a second chance. Others, he trailed off. Let's just say I recognize the difference between someone who made a poor choice in a desperate moment and someone with a pattern of deliberate harm. He handed me another envelope. My son's therapist believes making concrete amends would be beneficial for his recovery. Inside is a college fund for Charlotte. No strings attached. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to refuse, to not be indebted to the Maxwells in any way, but another part recognized that Charlotte deserved every opportunity I could give her. Thank you, I said simply, taking the envelope. Maxwell Sr. nodded once, then got back in the Tesla and drove away. When I told Jake and Michael about the encounter, they had predictably different reactions. It's a trap, Michael said immediately. It's guilt money, Jake countered. Rich people love throwing cash at problems they can't fix. Doesn't mean you shouldn't take it. In the end, I decided to accept the college fund for Charlotte, but stay at my current job. The hours were better for our family situation, and I didn't want any ties to places that might remind me of everything that had happened. 2 months later, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. I was making enough to cover our bills without working myself to death. Jake had Charlotte 2 weekends a month and came over for dinner once a week. Michael had scaled back to weekly check-ins, though he still insisted on maintaining our security system, just in case. One Saturday morning, Jake took Charlotte to the park while I tackled the mountain of laundry that had accumulated. As I was folding clothes, I found the business card Maxwell Sr. had given me. I stared at it for a long moment, then tucked it into my wallet, just in case. Later that day, Charlotte came home full of excitement about the playground and how Daddy had pushed her super high on the swings. As I helped her wash up for dinner, she asked innocently, "Mommy, are we rich now?" I laughed in surprise. "No, baby, we're not rich. Why do you ask?" She shrugged in that exaggerated way kids do. "Daddy said I have college money like rich kids." I made a mental note to talk to Jake about what he was saying around her. "You have a special savings account for when you're bigger, that's all." That night, after Charlotte was asleep, I sat on our small balcony looking at the stars. My phone pinged with a text from Jake. "Sorry about the rich comment. Got excited about her future. Won't happen again." I smiled despite myself. For all his faults, Jake loved Charlotte fiercely. A year later, I was promoted at work. The higher salary meant we could move to a slightly bigger apartment, one with 2 real bedrooms instead of the converted dining room Charlotte had been using. Jake was still working at the garage and had recently started taking night classes to get his business degree. He talked about opening his own shop someday. Michael had finally stopped his regular security checks, though he still came by for dinner occasionally. Charlotte called him Uncle Michael now, which always made him turn slightly red with embarrassment. We never heard from Junior again. Maxwell Sr. sent a birthday card for Charlotte each year with a note saying he'd added to her college fund, but otherwise kept his distance. As for me, I learned my lesson about taking shortcuts. Sure, that parking lot incident had seemed justified at the time, rich entitled kid stealing my spot when I was already having the day from hell, but the aftermath nearly destroyed everything I cared about. Sometimes when I'm stuck in traffic or waiting in a long line, I remind myself that patience is cheaper than the alternatives, much cheaper. One afternoon, almost 2 years after everything had happened, I was at the mall with Charlotte buying new shoes for school. As we walked back to the car, I spotted a familiar scenario unfolding. A woman with a child in the back seat, signal on, waiting for a parking spot, and a flashy sports car trying to cut in front of her. Without thinking, I walked over and stood in the empty spot until the woman could pull in. The sports car driver honked and yelled something rude out his window before speeding off. The woman rolled down her window, looking relieved. "Thank you so much. I've been circling forever, and my son has a doctor's appointment in 20 minutes. I smiled and waved it off. "No problem. Been there." As Charlotte and I walked to our car, she asked, "Why did you do that, Mommy?" I thought about it for a second. Because sometimes people forget to be kind when they're in a hurry, and sometimes a little kindness makes a big difference. Charlotte nodded seriously, processing this wisdom as only a 6-year-old can. Then she skipped ahead to our car, already moving on to thoughts of her new light-up sneakers. I watched her go, grateful for second chances and the simple peace of an ordinary life. No schemes, no revenge, no looking over our shoulders, just the everyday challenges of work, parenting, and trying to be better tomorrow than we were yesterday. That night, I deleted the last of my emergency contacts from my phone, numbers I'd kept just in case the Maxwells ever came back into our lives. It was finally time to close that chapter completely. As I tucked Charlotte into bed, she hugged me tight and whispered, "I love our life, Mommy." "Me too, baby," I said, kissing her forehead. "Me too."